There could be a major shift in Middle East strategy. What exactly is it? With Colombia changing, Trump's Monroe Doctrine is moving fast, sweeping through many nations. What changes will it bring? Also, the U.S. Democratic Party is facing the DSA and is, you could say, losing ground. Besides failing with young people, there's another reason, for the current Democratic weakness. Do you know what it is? All right, welcome to Good Morning America with Fang Wei. Welcome to the show. Hello to our YouTube viewers and to our listeners on Sound of Hope, Silicon Valley FM 96.1. Before we start, some breaking news just came in, A 7.4 magnitude earthquake hit Colombia in the northwest corner of the Pacific region, It's in the northwest of Colombia, near San Jose del Palmar in Choco province. The quake's depth was 96 kilometers and was felt in many places, including the capital Bogota, Medellin, Cali, and even parts of Venezuela, Ecuador, and Panama. As of now, there are no reports of large-scale casualties. Of course, buildings, roads, and public facilities were affected, but we don't know the extent yet, If there's more news, Fang Wei will give you an update very soon. All right, let's get to the main news for today, President Trump said Sunday he'll keep increasing economic pressure on Iran instead of starting a new military offensive, even though Iran is still defying the will of the United States. President Trump said, "We're handling it quietly. We're in a semi-negotiation state." He said, "We're looking at Iran's high inflation and the reality that they have no money, Iran is in a real bad economic spot with no money to pay its troops." He added that the U.S. naval blockade has deepened the economic crisis in Tehran. President Trump also said oil's just a bit over $75, Meaning the economic pain for U.S. consumers from the war isn't that great. President Trump said, "It'll be resolved. It always is. It's like a game of international chess." Okay, so he also posted a tweet, as you can see, He posted on Truth Social saying that Iran is out of money, The chart he showed is the exchange rate, which has plummeted from $1.1 per million Iranian rials to just half a cent. So the Iranian rial's exchange rate against the dollar has dropped by 201%? That's the situation. So it's safe to say that Iran's economy is in terrible shape. On the same day, Vice President Vance said on Fox News that they're using all means, diplomatic, economic, and military, to get the best result for Americans. It's basically shifted to economic pressure, which will, of course, be a long-term process, Also, a major change, President Trump told aides, and this is my own interpretation, a potentially major concession, but he did mention that even without a nuclear deal, if commercial shipping resumes, he might accept no deal and pull U.S. troops from the Middle East. But, even though the conditions were lowered, Iran then went on to demand billions of dollars in war reparations, the complete withdrawal of U.S. troops, an end to the naval blockade, and additional concessions before allowing free passage. This is all pretty much impossible. So analysts are saying that Iran has sensed Trump's urgency before the midterm elections, and they're now using the Strait of Hormuz as their biggest bargaining chip. Okay, also, Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, his name is Mojtaba Khamenei, I'll just call him Khamenei, hasn't made a public appearance since the start of the U.S.-Iran war. How's he doing now? Is he even still alive? This is a major point of doubt. And as more time passes, the doubt only grows. As it turns out, Iranian state media recently released a video of Khamenei's activities. Although it's only 12 seconds long, it seems intended to clear up this mystery. But the video backfired as soon as it came out. It was quickly discovered that the footage wasn't filmed recently. In the footage, Khamenei is sitting in a crowd teaching a religious class. Officials described it as a rare, first-ever public lecture. Do you see that? He's right there in person giving a lecture. This is the first time we're showing it to the public. However, someone quickly noticed that the exact same footage had already appeared back on March 26th, 5 months ago, in a documentary released by another Iranian media outlet called Rasa News Agency. In other words, this 12-second video released by state media wasn't some rare first-time appearance at all. So Fang Wei's comment was, geez, if you're gonna lie, at least put some effort into it. Of course, another thing is that lying is actually hard work because it's so easy to get caught. So the best way is just not to lie. Okay, well, let's talk about Colombia. Regarding the earthquake in Colombia we just mentioned, we hope the casualties aren't too high. Now, another big news story today is that yesterday, the young 47-year-old, well, 47 is very young, new president of Colombia, named Asprilla, was sworn in. He vowed to crack down on crime and leftist guerrillas, the communist guerrillas, and to launch an all-out war against drug cartels. At the same time, he announced he's joining the SHIELD plan, initiated by President Trump to combat drug trafficking in the Americas. The former president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, was a far-left anti-American and anti-Trump figure. He once stood on the streets of New York with a megaphone criticizing the U.S. and calling for U.S. soldiers to disobey orders. Luckily, he ran fast. He took off right after shouting, otherwise he almost got deported. And now he's finally out of office after losing the election. Now, the new president is a fan of Trump, you could say. He admires Trump's boldness and agrees with many of his policies. Before the election, Trump publicly announced his support for his victory. The new Colombian president's nickname is the Tiger. During his speech, he promised, "In our Tiger era, the government will crack down on crime and eliminate armed rebels." The new president of Colombia takes the president of El Salvador, their neighbor to the north, Bukele, as a role model. After Bukele was elected, he's also a very young president. He built a massive prison that can hold 60,000 people. So he rounded up a lot of gang members. Then El Salvador's public safety improved immediately, going from having the worst security in the Americas to being one of the safest countries now. The people of El Salvador were very grateful to Bukele, and as a result, he got 85% of the vote in his re-election, which is the third highest among democratic countries globally. The party he leads is even more impressive, taking 90% of the seats in Congress, and with some allied parties, they won 95% in total. So among the world's democracies, it's likely number one. Now yesterday was the inauguration day for Colombia's conservative president. At the same time, the United States announced it would provide $1 billion in aid to Colombia. In Colombia, as I mentioned, before that guy Petro, the leftist president, took power, Colombia had always been ruled by conservatives and had always been an ally of the United States. And now it's finally back on the conservative track, becoming a member of the conservative camp in the Americas. This camp is now constantly expanding, including 14 countries: the United States, Argentina, El Salvador, Honduras, Costa Rica, Paraguay, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, Panama, Bolivia, Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru. Among them, 8 or 9 countries have flipped in the past year and a half. There are 35 countries in the Americas in total, most of which are very small, but there are still quite a few where the left is in power. The large leftist countries in power are Canada, Brazil, and Mexico, plus socialist Venezuela, and a communist country, Cuba. But previously, the overall trend in Central and South America was socialist rule, but that's changing now. The Americas are turning to the right as more people see that socialism doesn't work, and they must follow the path of a market economy and constitutional democracy. And Trump's first election and his return to the White House have indeed set off a whirlwind of conservatism in Central and South America, greatly influencing Latin America. I've explained before that there's a theory that after Trump shut down USAID, it caused the American far left's influence on elections in Central and South America to lose momentum, which led to the political shifts in 8 countries there. And Trump, in this regard, strongly supports his allies. U.S. presidents or the U.S. government didn't used to intervene easily in foreign affairs, and even if they did, it was through intelligence systems and not obvious. But Trump wasn't polite at all and just went right ahead and did it. When Argentine President Milei was facing the midterm elections, President Trump gave him $20 billion in a currency swap to buy Argentine pesos. Additionally, he arranged $20 billion in financing from private banks to prepare for the emergency. And the result? The result was a landslide victory for Milei's party in the Argentine midterms. As it turned out, all the swapped currency was exchanged back, and they even made a profit. So it was Besson who did it, and Besson felt very proud, saying, "Look how well we did, helping them stabilize their political situation without losing a single cent and even making money." And also, a few days ago in Japan, Besan and the Bank of Japan joined forces to support the yen. The results were quite remarkable. The US might have poured in $5 to $10 billion. Now, with the Colombian president taking office, a $1 billion gift was given as a greeting. This all reflects President Trump's Monroeism, which is Donald Trump plus the Monroe Doctrine. Monroeism is moving forward in big strides. So Central and South America, or rather the Americas, are the top priority and the primary focus of the Trump administration's foreign policy. Okay, now let's talk about what's going on with American professional women's basketball. I've been talking about the WNBA story for 2 days now, and it's still developing. It's a very American story. Today, I'll give you a brief but comprehensive overview of the whole process. First of all, what is the WNBA? It stands for the Women's Basketball League, right? The WNBA. You might think, oh, the WNBA must be really popular, just like U.S. women's soccer, right? And not much different from the NBA, the Men's Basketball League. Not at all. The WNBA is actually a subsidiary of the NBA. Even though the NBA is for men and this is for women, basically no one watches these professional women's basketball games, you know? Why is that? Because the games aren't exciting, so they don't make any money. As a result, there's hardly any ticket revenue, and they can't sell merchandise either. So it's basically a league that's supported by the Men's Professional League, the NBA. Some even say it's like a charity, a non-profit organization that doesn't make money, just playing for show. That's the first characteristic. Nobody watches it. The second is that 65 to 70% are black and 35 to 40% are gay. So it's very DEI, very politically correct. So for this women's NBA, I'll just call it professional women's basketball in Chinese to keep it simple. So it has a few traits. First, no one watches. Second, it doesn't make money. And third, it's obsessed with political correctness. And then a sudden change occurred. In 2024, the basketball sensation Caitlin Clark from the University of Iowa, that's Feng Wei's school, officially made the leap to the professional level when she joined the Indiana Fever in the WNBA. Now, Clark played for the University of Iowa for 4 years. She's the all-time leading scorer in NCAA Division I history and one of the biggest stars in U.S. women's college basketball history. As soon as she joined the WNBA, the league just blew up. First of all, she's white, she has a normal gender, and most importantly, her skills are incredible. So women's basketball was suddenly revitalized and became very exciting to watch. As a result, it drew in American audiences and fans to watch the WNBA. They weren't just watching on TV, they were buying tickets and going to the arenas. So their ticket sales, sponsorships, and merchandise are all selling like crazy. In just over a year, it's like she alone, Caitlin Clark, has helped professional women's basketball earn over $1 billion. Now, when this happens, everyone actually gets a piece of the pie. Every player and every team owner is making money. Shouldn't everyone be thanking her? So what happened as a result? Well, as we say in mainland China, it's a case of envy, jealousy, and hate all at once. Many black players are intentionally fouling her, hitting her on the court, almost injuring her. It's happened many times in a very abnormal way. On her team, there's a woman named Sophie Cunningham. Let me introduce her. She's 5 years older than Clark. She's 29 and Clark is 24. She's like a big sister, looking out for her and protecting her so she doesn't get bullied too much or constantly hit. Well, Cunningham was interviewed once and asked about a sensitive topic. She was very outspoken. She said women's basketball should protect girls and biological males shouldn't play in the professional women's league. These words, this common sense statement, once spoken, actually caused a huge uproar. She became a target for the far left. She wasn't just attacked by far-left public opinion, but also by the owner of the Seattle women's team and the coach of the Minnesota women's team. They attacked her, well, not just her personally, but also the fans who support her. So then on the court, she was attacked again by a black player, a female player, with a foul. Did you see that? Did you see this? Take another look. It was like a decapitation move, just grabbing her by the neck with her hands. As a result, it's caused a huge uproar now. And then everyone is asking what's really going on. Of course, that player was ejected, but she's still being stubborn, constantly saying that the attacks on them are because they are white supremacists. So many people are asking what's going on. Is it white supremacy or black supremacy? Why is it reversed? What's the deal? Then Royce White and Enes Kanter Freedom, these two grown men with beards, announced they want to join the Professional Women's League. Why? His gender identity in women's basketball is based on self-identification. So they said, especially Royce White, who is very humorous, he said, "Sometimes I feel like a woman. When I feel like a woman, I'll just go play in a women's game. Then after the game, I'll probably go back to being a man. Maybe." Anyway, it's all just a joke, just poking fun at the Women's League. As a result, the WNBA commissioner was forced to announce that they need to discuss this and hold a formal meeting to define what a woman is. That in itself has become a laughingstock. Of course, looking at the bright side, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for women's basketball to rise in the U.S. because of Caitlin Clark, but now it's facing this kind of controversy. If this controversy continues, it could really disappoint American fans, and women's basketball might just take another tumble back down. So this lose-lose situation, why do this? It's become a very prominent phenomenon in America today. Many media outlets, quite a few of our conservative media, are running front-page articles on this. Okay, next, let's talk about a story involving the Democratic Party, how the Democratic Party is being undermined by the so-called Socialist Party. American politics is actually a constantly changing game of power and money. But for the modern Democratic Party, it's the oldest political party in history. You should know, the Republican Party was born in the late 1950s, right? The late 1850s, it was brought to life by Abraham Lincoln. But the Democratic Party has an even longer history, dating back to 1828, so it's been around for nearly 200 years now. However, regarding the rise of the Democratic Socialists of America, or DSA, within its ranks, the Democratic Party is now feeling unprecedentedly powerless. So why can't they just reject them? Why can't they purge the party? Of course, one reason is that young voters are now being completely swept up by the DSA. There's another important reason too, which I'll get to in a moment. What we're seeing now is the DSA, the Socialist Party, aggressively pushing its candidates all across the country. After the victory of New York Mayor Mamdani, it triggered a whole series of electoral wins. So establishment Democrats are now sounding the alarm. A headline from the Wall Street Journal captures their sentiment. A small group of socialists is so in panic within the Democratic Party. There's a headline on NBA News that says, "The slumping Democratic establishment takes another hit after El Sayed's victory in Michigan." And recently, former President Obama's advisor, Van Jones, also warned that the DSA is hijacking the Democratic Party. Alright, so what's the obvious fact here? It's that the Democratic Party has no control over the DSA. First, there's no way to stop DSA members from calling themselves Democrats. Second, there's no way to block them from redefining the Democratic Party. Now, there's another major reason for this, and it's because of a Supreme Court ruling from 20 years ago. Before 2010, American political parties dominated candidate selection and voter choice through fundraising, endorsements, and handpicking candidates. A candidate put forward by the party could almost certainly win the Democratic primary, so the primary was really the party's primary, the party's decision. But today, that power is almost completely evaporated. How did that happen? In 2010, the Supreme Court ruled on a case called Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. And what was the result of that ruling? It means that for individuals, American individuals, donating to a party or a candidate, their money's limited, like only $2,000 some dollars, so they can only donate that much per year. But American political action committees, known as super PACs, can raise virtually unlimited funds. And anyone donating to a political action committee can also, donate an unlimited amount. You could donate $1,000, $10,000, $100 million, or even $1 billion. But the catch is that super PACs cannot communicate with the candidates they support. They must operate independently. So what does that mean? The Supreme Court's ruling has a clear logic. If you have money and you want to pour it into a super PAC, as long as you don't coordinate or communicate or join forces with the candidate, then that's your own freedom of speech. Your money is your freedom of speech. If you have more money, your voice of free speech is louder. That's how it is, and that's how it should be. All right, so before the Citizens United case I just mentioned, the political party was essentially the super PAC. Whoever they picked was basically who won. But after the ruling in that case, it's just not like that anymore. How so? So who is the super PAC? Whoever has the money is. So Mamdani accused the Democrats of being run by high-paid consultants and big money interests. But how did he actually get into power? Well, a late hedge fund billionaire named Jim Simons, his daughter Elizabeth Simons, along with her stepmother Marilyn and two siblings, share a fortune of $32.5 billion. They ended up writing a check to a super PAC in New York called New Yorkers for Lower Costs. They wrote a check, and that one check was for $250,000. And then this group poured nearly $2 million in donations into Mamdani's campaign. So his election as mayor of New York City, this kind of unusual victory, didn't happen for no reason. The funding was very abundant, and that abundant funding didn't come from the Democratic National Committee. In fact, the Democratic National Committee today is no longer the center of Democratic political fundraising. The party is now heavily in debt. The National Committee is actually financially bankrupt. After Kamala Harris finished the 2024 election, her debts haven't been paid off, never cleared. But hey, Democrats at all levels aren't worried. Why? Because they now rely on super PACs to help them fight the midterm elections. In other words, they don't rely on the party anymore. And in other words, the party doesn't have the final say anymore. So after the Supreme Court ruling in 2010, it ushered in the era of super PACs. Now, the Socialist Party has taken full advantage of this mechanism, greatly threatening the longest governing major party in American history, the Democratic Party. So, what do you think about this? Actually, let me share my view. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, because the 2010 Supreme Court ruling had a very clear logic. As long as you don't coordinate with the candidate, how much money you have is your business, your freedom. So with this ruling, it's no longer party-centered, but people-centered, or centered on wealthy citizens. Now, whether this is a good or bad thing, I don't know what you think, but I think it's a good thing. Elon Musk can use his funds, this unlimited injection into super PACs, to win the election battles he wants to win. Of course, money isn't everything in an election, but it is a significant force. So there's definitely a factor here. Do wealthy people have more powerful free speech, a bigger megaphone, a louder voice that everyone can hear? Do you think this is reasonable or not? I'd like to invite everyone to speak up and share your views, okay? That is, the voice of wealthy people in terms of free speech is much louder. Let's do a poll and see if you all agree. Anyway, I just wanted to clarify one thing about American political elections, which is that when it comes to fundraising, the party's getting weaker and weaker. Of course, that's not the case on the Republican side. President Trump's fundraising ability is very strong. The Republican National Committee is certainly not out of money, and it has no debt at all. This is a phenomenon unique to the Democrats. All right, let's look at this first. Then we'll circle back to the Smithsonian Institution and its, what's it called? Betraying its own heritage. What's the deal? President Trump has officially declared war on the Smithsonian Institution. The Institute declared war. In Chinese, it's called the Smithsonian Institution, or the Smithsonian Academy. Last night, I actually explained in detail that the Smithsonian has become a hub for the American Cultural Revolution, quietly rewriting American history to cater to far-left views. And when I say far-left here, I'm actually referring to the American Communist Party. Now, the Smithsonian Institution has 21 museums under its wing, right? Much of its exhibition content involves, whether overtly or covertly, directly or indirectly, attacking America, shaming America, including framing American history as a history of American slavery or a history of American opposition to slavery. Then, in July of this year, the White House Domestic Policy Council released a report, and this report is called Saving the American Story. The entire report is 162 pages long, and its conclusion is that the Smithsonian, the National Museum of American History, has been captured. By captured, it means it has fallen. For example, it mentions that the director of the National Museum of American History, named Hardig, said in a speech that history as practice is an important tool for social justice, saying that America's long and violent racial history continues to exist and must be reckoned with. Let me translate that. It means history can be modified to fit a certain narrative, to fit a certain concept, or, as we Chinese are very familiar with, to fit a certain ism. We all know that the CCP rewriting history is a common occurrence, and the purpose of rewriting history is to conform to the communist view of history. So, in mainland China, human history is called, as they say, the history of class struggle. What about peasant uprisings? It's peasants overthrowing the landlord class, a struggle between two classes. Actually, if you really read history, it's not like that at all. There's almost no dynasty whose replacement was a peasant uprising overthrowing the landlord class. Then Fox News interviewed a black bishop who is also an author. Oh, and here's something interesting. This person is named Errol Walker Jackson, and he's also a descendant of slaves. So in the interview, he said that the Smithsonian, the National Museum of American History, is indoctrinating anti-Americanism against the greatest country on this earth. He said, "I feel both angry and sad. These brainwashing machines are persuading people to accept their narrative." He said, if you learn these things from the very beginning of your education, from childhood to adulthood, you have to go through 20,000 hours of such content. No wonder people protest outside ICE facilities. No wonder the people at the Smithsonian want to call America the worst place on earth, because they've been brainwashed with this. This Bishop Jackson, he said, there is no place on earth that affirms human dignity more than here, more than America, and provides more opportunities for human flourishing. And we frankly admit that despite our obvious differences, we are ultimately one nation under God. He said, I'm the great-grandson of a slave. I grew up in a broken home and in foster care, but my life has always been blessed. He said it's first by God's grace, and because I live in a country where anything is possible. Here, you're free. You can dream and work hard to achieve the gifts, talents, and abilities God gave you. So that's what it says here. Those are his words. So why has the Smithsonian been pushing American history as just a history of resisting slavery? Actually, compared to real American history, and I've studied it for a long time, the rich details are too many to list. Not only that, America is the only country that fought a civil war specifically to abolish slavery. So, however, let me put this into a broader context. Maybe then you'll see it more clearly, because almost everyone from mainland China understands this. The Chinese Communist Party says human history is a history of class struggle, right? But the American Communist Party, or the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, says American history is a history of racial struggle. The CCP talks about class struggle. Here they talk about racial struggle. Now, this class struggle divides people into classes to create hatred and conflict, right? Peasants and landlords were pitted against each other. The CCP used one side to fight the other and won its peasant war. The result of that victory was that they entered Beijing and took power, right? Once they had power, they trampled the peasants they just used. This is a reality everyone in mainland China knows. But in America, there are no classes, or at least you can't manufacture class conflict. But America has race, so they pit blacks against whites, using blacks to fight and oppose whites. That's what's happening in NBA teams. It'll be the same for black people. One day, when the American communists finish seizing power, though they do it through votes, after the racial struggle is over, I'll make a prediction. Black people will be trampled by them. Of course, maybe my prediction will never be proven true. Why? Because the Communist Party might not be able to take over America.